on, you guys? It is your boy, the American F1 fan, Eric Ringel here, and we're back. And if you haven't heard of a podcast, the Red Flags podcast, it's actually a really good listen, and I enjoy to listen to it from time to time. They recap races, but one of the things that they also do is they have Guenther Steiner on for a weekly visit called the Vanka Hours. And recently they had Guenther Steiner on to grade the F1 grid, and I've got to talk about the grades that he gave out, so let's talk about that now. So Guenther and the Red Flags podcast did their own tier list, grading every F1 driver that's on the grid right now, excluding Franco Colapinto, who's just going to be taking over in Imola this weekend for Jack Doohan. But they did give grades to all 20 drivers that were on the grid as the time of this recording. And let's talk about the grades. Now, first, we're going to talk about the D-list tier. Now, this is the basically the bottom. They went from S tier, which is basically godlike, all the way down to D tier, which is basically failing, if you want to call it. I would rather go the A, B, C, D, and F, but most, I think, schools and most younger people know S, A, B, C, and D. So in the D tier, he's got three drivers. He's got Jack Doohan, which I completely agree with. Alpine has been bad. Jack Doohan's been not so great. But again, I don't necessarily know if it was worth taking him out of the Alpine seat so quickly into the season. Then they had Liam Lawson, which again, this is another one of those ones that I agree with. Liam Lawson has been god-awful this year. At Red Bull, he was absolutely nowhere near Max Verstappen. And then now that he's gone to the V-Carb team, he's been basically finishing just behind Isaac Hadjar in almost every metric at that team. But then the one that really puzzled me the most, and I know this guy gets a lot of hate in F1, and, you know, rightfully so or unrightfully so, it's Lance Stroll. Guenther grades Lance Stroll at a D. Now, more importantly, he grades him at a D+, which was just a little bit off of the C tier, and I don't understand where Guenther is going with this grade. If we're grading solely on what the 2025 season has brought so far, it's that Lance Stroll has scored all of Aston Martin's points so far, and he's got 14 points on the season. And yeah, Guenther calls it, Guenther calls it like disaster points is what he calls it. That basically he only scored those points because of disaster at a Grand Prix. Now, I understand that, but he still scored points for the team, and he's the only person that scored points for Aston Martin. Like, how does he at least not get a C+, if, maybe a B-? I mean, we're grading solely on the 2025 season so far, and Lance Stroll, I mean, compared to Fernando Alonso, which we'll get into a little bit later, is way better than a D+ right now. So moving on to the C tier, he had three drivers here as well. He had Gabriel Bortoleto and Nico Hülkenberg from the Sauber team, which I agree with. I think we all looked at Sauber as a team that was going to be the bottom of the totem pole, which, really we haven't seen that yet. And the midfield is so close together that, Sauber's gotten some points. Nico scored points for Sauber at the beginning of the season in Australia, where it was, kind of one of those disaster results that he got the points there. But I mean, he got Sauber points. And at times we've seen Gabriel Bortoleto show some decent skill in a Sauber car that really probably doesn't deserve to be where it's at right now. We saw in the preseason that Sauber was going to be probably one of the worst teams, if not the worst team. And even going into the season, every F1 pundit said Sauber was going to be bad, and they've actually somewhat performed, and their car is starting to slowly get better. And, I see the grades that Gabriel Bortoleto and Nico Hülkenberg here got in C's. Now, Hülkenberg got a C+ on his grade, and then Bortoleto just got a straight-out C. So I get it. Hülkenberg scored points. He definitely deserves that. But then the one that, again, is leaving me puzzled is Yuki Tsunoda. Now, Granted, VCAR was not a great team at the beginning of the season. We saw it in the very first race. Isaac Hadjar, retired, before the formation lap even really got going. But Yuki Tsunoda did enough at VCAR to deserve the call up, to the main team. And then, since he's gotten to the main team, he's starting to score points. We know as Red Bull goes, Max Verstappen is the guy there. He's always going to be the number one guy. He's going to deserve all the upgrades first. He's going to deserve all the, the lauding of his driver talent and whatnot. But Yuki Tsunoda has started to step up little by little. We saw it in the sprint race in Miami, where he finished ahead of Max Verstappen. And Guenther's, explanation here was, well, Max Verstappen got a penalty. Well, Max Verstappen did something wrong and deserved the penalty. So, the fact that Yuki Tsunoda, we can't literally just say, oh, well, because he got a penalty, he didn't necessarily deserve those points. Yuki did what he was supposed to do to get that car up into the points, and then he did it in the main race as well in Miami. He's starting to get a hold of what that car should do and what he wants it to do. We're starting to slowly see that Yuki is starting to pick up exactly what Red Bull wanted, and he's starting to score points. Now, yes, he's nowhere near a Max Verstappen yet, but Yuki's starting to show that he deserved this seat long, long ago. And to give him just a C plus here, I think he's over-delivered what everybody expected. I think everybody expected him to go to Red Bull and literally, do the exact same thing that Liam Lawson did. And he's done way better than Liam Lawson ever could have done, with what he was expected to and what he was doing at Red Bull. Liam Lawson, deserved to lose that seat, but Yuki Tsunoda, I think, is finally starting to show that he deserved that seat all along. Moving on to the B list. Now, the B tier list, this one is long. This one is one of the longer ones that we got. So we got Fernando Alonso, Isaac Hadjar, Ollie Bierman, Carlos Sainz, Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, and Kimi Antonelli. So let's go over these one by one real quick. Isaac Hadjar, I think, is up there. I can almost consider him like one of those C plus, B minus. It's one of those it's really close, and I totally understood Guenther's grade here at a B. I would have probably put him at a B minus, but that's just, splitting hairs at this point. Ollie Bierman, after that first race weekend in Australia, I was one of those guys that was like, after Australia, I wondered why he got that seat at Haas, and, was starting to second guess what Io Komatsu and Haas were doing. But ever since then, he has really started to show that he's starting to come into his own in Formula One. He's putting up some results. He's scoring points. Yes, he doesn't have as many points as Lance Stroll, but he's starting to show that he can be up there with Ocon on certain weekends. Now, moving on to Carlos Sainz, I don't know if I necessarily agree with Carlos being at a B or at a B level. I think with the Williams team, I think there was a lot of people that thought Williams was going to be, bottom of the, mid-card teams, wasn't going to be really challenging. Everybody questioned why Carlos Sainz moved over to Williams, but we're starting to see a Williams team make a resurgence in Formula One that I think has been long overdue as far as a Williams team goes. Carlos is one of those guys that's really pushing Alexander Albon to be a better driver. And I don't necessarily know if Carlos Sainz deserved to be here. I could see the B plus. I could see maybe an A minus, because I think in regards to the whole Williams team, they're both performing at a level that they needed to start moving this team back up the midfield and back up towards the top four teams. Now, moving on, we got Pierre Gasly. He's doing an amazing job at Alpine, basically a one-man crew at Alpine so far in the season. And, Pierre Gasly deserves definitely the grade he got. Esteban Ocon, another guy that deserves a B, but Kimi Antonelli, on the other hand, is a guy I think that deserves an A. And I mean, he's doing wonders at Mercedes. He's 18 years old. He literally just turned 18 not long ago. And everybody expected him to have growing pains. And I did too. I didn't think necessarily Kimi deserved a spot in Formula One quite yet, but he's proving me and he's proven a lot of other people wrong after the outing that he had at Monza last year in free practice one, where he literally didn't put in a lap and crashed the car on his first lap. He's definitely showing people that he deserves to be in F1. And I think he's showing himself to be a top tier driver at Mercedes. And, you know, Mercedes is now having to start think about, you know, which driver do we want leading this team into the future? Now, George Russell's a guy that, you know, that everybody tabbed when Lewis Hamilton left, that he was going to be the guy to take over that number one spot. But we're starting to see Kimi start to push George a little bit more. And I'm going to be interested to see, you know, as the rest of the 2025 season goes on, where Kimi, you know, ends up when it comes to between him and George Russell. We saw George Russell get off to a really good head start against Kimi, you know, with the weekend that was in Australia for all the rookies just having a bad weekend. But little by little, Kimi's starting to work his way up towards the top and at least towards, you know, the third best team and, you know, starting to push George. But the one that, I mean, makes absolutely zero sense on this list is Fernando Alonso, who has 0 points. Yet somehow Guenther believes that Fernando is a B tier driver on the 2025 season. And I've got to be one that's got to say, and I think there's way too many people out there to say this, Fernando Alonso this year is not a B tier driver right now. I would have literally put him in the D tier. If you're going to put Lance Stroll there, put Fernando there as well. Fernando has literally made mistakes that we have not seen in a long time from Fernando. We saw the uncharacteristic spin in Australia. We've seen him trying to push a car that's just not near the midfield anymore, and he's pushing it too hard. He's over pushing the limits of what this car brings, and he's making mistakes that you would typically see rookies make in Formula One. And, you know, the fact that he's got 0 points, I just don't like, it just doesn't make, it makes zero sense to me how Fernando is a B tier driver in Formula One right now, at least. He's been great in the past, but if we're grading just on the 2025 season, sorry, but he's failing. So moving on to the A tier. Now, there is a list of 6 names here. And so let's run down them real quick. So we got Alexander Albon, Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, and George Russell. So I agree probably pretty close to all 4 of these. I mean, George Russell has started off the season really, really well at Mercedes, kind of stamping his name to that number one spot. Charles Leclerc has shown signs of some shakiness, and Lewis Hamilton has shown some signs. I could have totally understood, you know, sticking him in the B tier, but they both got A grades. Lewis Hamilton got an A- from Guenther Steiner, whereas Charles Leclerc got an A, and I don't necessarily know how you come up with those grades, whereas Lewis Hamilton was the guy that actually won a sprint race in China, or got on pole in China, and produced a great race in China, at least in the sprint race. And then we obviously saw that they both got disqualified. We've seen some good moments from Leclerc, you know, pushing for podiums. He's gotten a couple. Lewis Hamilton still, I don't think, has wrapped his head totally around the 2025 car. And as we know, Ferrari took a different direction going into this 2025 season. And I mean, really, I think if we're being honest, I think Ferrari was really looking at Lewis Hamilton for the 2026 season when the new regulations come into pass. But Hamilton's at least won something. I mean, he won a sprint race, whereas Leclerc has gotten some podiums here and there. But I do see where the A's come in. But I could also see the B grade. Like I said, George Russell has done an amazing job. And Alexander Albon, I mean, it has been producing exactly the way I think Williams wanted him to, and he's getting pushed by Carlos Sainz, who was in a Ferrari last season, was showing that he could win races at Ferrari, and bringing him into a Williams team now. This is exactly what they wanted to see from Alex Albon, is a guy that can push for middle of the point tables, scoring 5th, 6th place finishes, getting the occasional 4th, maybe even getting a shock podium in there somewhere. So I totally understand why he gave the A grade to Alexander Albon. The two that I'm kind of puzzled on here is Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, the two guys that are leading the point standing so far this season. Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris are not A tier. I would have literally put them at an S tier, and his reasoning behind it was their qualifying efforts. Now, I get it. They probably should be qualifying 1st and 2nd, but as we knew going into this 2025 season, this season was going to be extremely close, and we've seen that time in and time out where it comes down to just one lap of putting it all together. And I'm sorry, but not everybody's going to do that every stinking time. And Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris have shown that they can win races. Now, Oscar Piastri doing that a little bit more now than Lando Norris, but I would still put them both in the S tier. And I know we're splitting hairs here, but I just don't see where Guenther thinks that they're just A tier. And then his reasoning behind it was their qualifying. I don't necessarily look at their qualifying as the problem here. It's the problem of you've got two #1 drivers and they're both fighting for that #1 spot. Who gets that, that preferential treatment? And right now we're still kind of on the fence of who gets #1. And then moving on to the S tier, there's only one name here, and it's Max Verstappen. And I gotta say, I don't necessarily get it. I don't think at this point in the season right now with what Max is doing is S tier level. I mean, yeah, I would probably put him in the A+ category for what he's able to do with a Red Bull car that has literally fallen behind McLaren as far as developments go. I definitely have him at an A+, but I don't necessarily know if he's S tier right now. He's had some shock qualifying efforts, but he's also had some really good qualifying efforts. And, I get it. It's Max Verstappen. It's, he's champion until he's not champion anymore. And, I get it, but I feel like this season, Guenther is grading on what they've done in the past. And, I don't think that anybody, like I said, I maybe would include Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris S tier, but I can see why. I can see kind of his reasoning. But again, Max Verstappen is another guy then I would have had at least at an A+ tier or an A tier. And I don't know. I think Guenther is grading more on what they've brought in their entire career and not necessarily what they're bringing in 2025. But guys, let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think of Guenther's tier list. And let me know, should I put a tier list together of my own? We have Imola this weekend, and we'll have a little bit more of an understanding of where all the drivers are. Would you guys like to see me do a tier list of my own? Let me know that in the comment section down below, guys. As always, hit that like button for more Formula One content. It helps get this video out to more and more Formula One fans. So please hit that like button if you can. And if you are new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, so every subscriber counts in getting me to 1,000. So hit that subscribe button if you guys are new. But guys, thank you so much for watching this video. And guys, the American F1 fan, I'm Eric Ringel, signing off.